This week, President Biden okayed Ukraine to fire U.S.-supplied missiles into Russia. This marks an escalation in U.S. involvement in the war, and the resulting strike led Vladimir Putin to hold a press conference where he lit a cigarette and said Russia's new nuclear policy was going to be updated to simply read F-A-F-O. Obviously, this has led to a lot of people worrying about the possibility of a nuclear war, myself included. This background behind me might look like my normal library, but it's actually my backup bunker book collection. I'm currently 30 feet underground with enough food to last me through the inevitable nuclear fallout. Meanwhile, our Congress is in full swing. They came out and repudiated the Russian president by making a statement of their own. They outlawed biological men from using the women's restroom on Capitol Hill. Checkmate, Putin. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. Before we get into today's episode, right at the top of the show, I want to take a moment. We got to talk about something. It's kind of serious, a little somber. I don't want to bring the mood down from our intro, but we do have to talk about it. Last week, before we put the episode out, I didn't know when I recorded it at the time, but many of you will probably know him. Dennis Prager, a radio host, author, host of the Fireside Chat, founder of PragerU, this giant among men. He took a fall last week, and he hurt himself. They haven't released a lot of details, but apparently it's very serious, very life-threateningly so. And he is in his 70s. He's not necessarily the healthiest person of all time, but he's a great influence on me, and he is a fantastic person to learn from. His books are wonderful. He wrote, actually, I have a couple of them on the shelf here. He wrote a series of books recently. It's a 5-series on the first 5 books of the Bible. It's called The Rational Bible. It is fantastic. For anyone who hasn't read it, you should go read it. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. It is a great book to help you understand the most important book ever written. So if you are the praying type, or if you're the kind who wants to send well wishes, letters, whatever, social media messages, whatever the case may be, he could use it because he is a giant influence of mine and a huge person within the conservative movement. He's done a lot of good for the world. So Dennis Prager's out there. Give him your thoughts, your prayers, send him messages to the family, and let's just hope he gets better soon because we need more people like him in the world, not less. Okay, now off the serious note, let's get into our favorite comment from last week. Our number one fan, Kevin, said, another great podcast making conservatism the sane choice. Never let it be said you have no sense of humor. I can't remember laughing this much for a while. Telling it like it is. Thank you, Kevin. That's what we always strive to do here on the Chrestman Conversation. I like to have fun. I like to poke fun at people. We always like to, especially politicians. If you're the man in the arena, if you're a politician, you want to have control over other people's life, you are going to be the subject of mockery. You put yourself in that position. And there's nothing that I like better to do than make fun of politicians because I don't find them that impressive as people. We want to be nice. We want to be charitable in our behaviors and our words. But, you can't say I want to control you and then expect me to also like you. It doesn't work both ways. So we like to have fun. That's all. That's what we're here to do. Have fun. Tell the truth. That's what our goals are. Anyway. Today's episode of the podcast, we have got a lot of things we're going to cover. I think we have 5 topics. A couple of them are just going to be real brief, but there's one that we want to talk about a little bit more in depth, and that's the one that led off the top of our show. So let's talk about Ukraine, everyone's favorite topic. And I know it's everyone's favorite topic because what's hilarious is that when you make Ukraine the center of anything you put on social media, the amount of views just craters. It's like the opposite effect of putting Donald Trump front and center in what you do. Whenever I have a podcast and Donald Trump is in the title or we're talking about Trump, the views are outrageous. Whenever we talk about Ukraine, I know the views on this episode in particular, the algorithm is just going to eat it alive. It's just not going to go anywhere. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like when you made videos about COVID. I don't know if it's intentional or I don't know. People just do not care. But we talk about Ukraine. No one cares, at least on social media. You might pretend you care, but the algorithm doesn't care. That's for sure. That's beside the point. That's not really have anything to do with Ukraine. It's just making a point. So Ukraine, where are we? Does anyone know where we're at in this war? Does anyone know why we're fighting still? Does anyone know what the point is or why we just had this escalation? As everyone knows, when I said in the intro is absolutely true, Biden, for the first time, okayed U.S.-supplied missiles to be fired into Russia. Now, we've been supplying Ukraine weapons. This is not an update. We have been doing that since the onset of this war. But this is the first time they have been fired into Russia, which is it's an escalation. And that's not necessarily a good thing. We're going to talk about that just a little bit. These American-made missiles that were fired into Russia, they have a big, long tactical name. And Russia has basically come out. They attacked back on Thursday. So I believe the initial Ukraine attack was on Tuesday, and now Russia fired back on Thursday. This escalation caused Russia to amend their nuclear, rules that they have, whatever they call them. And it basically says now that, so this is basically it reads, obviously this is a translation from Russian, but it says, an attack from a non-nuclear state, if backed by a nuclear power, will be treated as a joint assault on Russia. So this basically they amended their nuclear, what is it called? The rules for their nuclear engagement. So in the U.S., we have rules of engagement for fighting a hostile force. We also have a nuclear strike first and retaliation guideline, and Russia has basically the same thing. Like, when will Russia strike first? When will they use nuclear arms in response to attacks? So they updated that. I don't remember if it has I'm sure it does. It has a name, but that's what we're talking about. So they updated their nuclear response guidelines that basically said they won't use nuclear. It basically says that they're not going to use the nuclear option against a non-nuclear power. However, they amended it to make it seem like if you are a nuclear power and you are backing a non-nuclear state, that state itself is going to be treated like a nuclear state. So everyone goes, oh my God, they did this because the U.S. is now backing Ukraine. So now Russia is basically saying they're going to treat Ukraine like a nuclear power, which means, according to Russia's own rules, that they could do a nuclear strike in Ukraine. Is this going to happen? No. It's not going to happen. Vladimir Putin, you could say a lot of things about him. He's a thug. He's a dictator. He's a bad man. I agree with all that. He's not a good person. He's not stupid. He certainly is not stupid. In a country that is known for eating its leaders alive, he has managed to maintain a 20-year grip on power, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. In a country that often assassinates its leaders and the people underneath him often turn on him and execute him. It is a country that is ripe with a history of just people turning on the leader and killing him. He has managed to stay in power for basically longer than any major world leader in the world in modern times that I can think of, at least. There might be another example out there, but I can't think of someone who ruled a major country for so long. I don't know when the leader of China took power, but I don't think it was before Vladimir Putin. Anyway, the point is he's not stupid. He is not a stupid man. You can say a lot of things about him, but you can't say he's dumb. And he is not going to use nuclear weapons. I don't see him doing this. If he was on his deathbed, he's Hitler in the bunker, and all of a sudden the walls are closing in, and he doesn't see what he has to lose, maybe. But I don't even think then, because I think Vladimir Putin really believes in Russian supremacy and the idea that Russia is a great nation with a great history. Russia has a very interesting history. It's a gigantic country. It's the largest country in the world. And it has a rich and colorful history, and Vladimir Putin is a big believer in that. So even if Vladimir Putin himself was threatened and he's in the bunker, he thinks he's going to be executed, I don't think he pushes the button, because he's smart enough to know it doesn't matter how good Russia's nuclear capabilities are. You push the button, the world is done, because Russia is also done, and that's what he fights for. He's not necessarily fighting for his personal legacy, although I think that is important to him. He's fighting to make Russia a great country again. And I don't think he's going to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, because I think the whole world would then turn against him, and it would be a lot different situation than he's in right now. So what does this mean? Why did he do it? Why would he do this if he has no intention of using nuclear weapons? Well, I believe that it is just to do exactly what he did to the media and to the people, which is make them nervous and get them talking and have them say, oh my God, this Russian guy is crazy. He could do whatever he wants. And now he's going to use nuclear weapons, and we should all be getting under our desks and in our bunkers, and everyone should be nervous. That's what he wants. He wants people to not want this war to continue because it's in his best interest for the war to end. So that's what he's looking for. And the media is happy to oblige him because that's what they do. They do the most obvious thing, even when it is obviously in the interest of people who want to use them against themselves. So the media is going along with it. They're making it a big story. They're making it seem like a big deal. It's not a big deal. It really isn't, because I can tell you what's going to happen, and I could tell you what the best outcome would be. I am not against arming Ukraine in principle, to say the U.S. supplies weapons to Ukraine. I think that the amount of money and the amount of aid we've been sending them to one of the most corrupt countries on the face of the planet is absurd. It's ridiculous. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions, 800 times, and then multiply that by 800. Then that's too much aid. We know that country is corrupt. We know that a lot of that money is not going to fight Russia. It's going to a bunch of oligarchs in Ukraine. We always talk about the Russian oligarchs. Well, Ukraine has that problem too. And so I'm not for that. But sending them weapons and giving them enough supplies to keep Russia at bay, I'm kind of for this. I don't see that as a bad thing. Russia is our ideological enemy, so weakening them militarily is not a bad thing. However, what's the end goal? Can anyone articulate what the end goal in Ukraine is? What do we think is going to happen? Does anyone know? Does anyone have an idea? I have an idea. And the idea is we stop the war right now. That should be it. It's done. It's gone long enough. It's been years. We don't need to do it anymore. Get Putin and get Zelensky to the table and negotiate a deal. And basically, the deal is what's already the reality on the ground, which is that Russia now controls parts of the country that they've taken, Donbass, Crimea. It's theirs now. That's the way it works. They won that. That's good. They don't get all of Ukraine, but they get the parts that they already control there. And Ukraine gets to remain Ukraine, and everyone has to go about their life. And that's it. That's the war. That's it in the nutshell. It's over. It's done. You could end it tomorrow with that deal, because Vladimir Putin gets a little bit of what he wants. Zelensky gets a little bit of what he wants, which is to be done with the war, and then the war is over. That's what Vladimir Putin, I think, at this point wants. He knows he's not going to conquer Ukraine. And the people out there who are mistaken in their beliefs that Ukraine could, quote unquote, win this war have no idea what they're talking about. Let me explain something to you. Ukraine cannot win a war against Russia. It's not going to happen. And you say, well, how is that? And actually, I wonder if, let me see if I can pull this up real quick, just so I want to have the exact data here that I'm talking about. Give me 1 second, people. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Here we go. Let me pull this up side by side. And I'll actually show you for effect, because I think it'll be better. Let me explain to you why Ukraine can't win a war against Russia. Here, take a look at this. Take a look at this for me. This is why. This is Ukraine's population. Ukraine has a population of 37 million people that live in Ukraine, okay? Russia has a population of 143 million people. Well, why does that make a difference? The bigger country doesn't always win. The amount of people in Ukraine that are of fighting age and the amount of people in Russia that are of fighting age, which means men who will face battle, is not comparable. The Russian military is not like fighting the Indian military, right? India might have a big military. They're not as well trained as some of the other places. They're not as well equipped as some of the other places. So it's not necessarily the size that matters, people. However, in this case it is, because Russia is not that. Russia is a well-equipped, and despite how the initial stumbles in the beginning of the war went, they are a good military power. Ukraine cannot win the war. They're not going to conquer Russia. So what does a win look like? They're going to drive them back out of the place that they already control, and then what? That's it? They go back to the original borders. That's a win for Ukraine. It's not going to happen. Russia has too many people, 143 million. They have 100 million more people than Ukraine. They're not going to win that war. It's just not going to happen. Because think about it like the Civil War between the North and South here in the United States. Why did the North win the Civil War? It is not because our generals were better. It is not because the Union Army fought better than the Confederate Army. This is actually not true. The Confederate Army often fought better and won more battles, but why did they lose? Because the population density in the North was much greater. And when Grant got in there, he realized this. He understood that the way that you win is by engaging in fights, because the Confederate soldiers were not going to be able to replenish their ranks as easily as the Union. So a lot more people in the North died than in the South, but Grant understood that this was okay because he had more people to lose. And it sounds gruesome, but that is the way that Russia will view this war. They say, well, we have more people to lose. It doesn't matter. If the same amount of Russians and Ukrainians die, or even slightly more Russians than Ukrainians die, Russia wins in a landslide, walking away. It's not comparable. And people don't seem to understand this. The size of Russia, the size of the Russian population is so much greater than anywhere else that they have just an endless amount of people that they can throw in Ukraine, and it doesn't matter if it's a blender, because as long as Ukrainians die and Russians die, it doesn't matter. This was the story of World War II in Russia. Does anyone remember the Battle of Stalingrad or any of that, where the Russians would send out people? They didn't have enough guns for all the people that they had. So they would supply one person with a weapon and one person with extra ammo, and they said, when the guy with the weapon dies, you pick up his weapon, and then you die, and it's fine. But they didn't have enough guns for everyone. They sent people out there literally with no guns just to die, because they knew they had the people to do it. And it's the same story in Ukraine. Ukraine cannot win this war in the way that people in the West seem to think that they can, and it's just a gigantic mistake for people in the West to assume that there's another ending. There's not an ending where Ukraine just wins. It doesn't work that way. So you have to negotiate for the best possible thing. I think Donald Trump is a savvy businessman, and he understands foreign policy on a gut level. I think he goes in there and does exactly what I'm saying, which is Russia is basically going to keep the territory they've conquered, and Ukraine gets to remain a country, and that's it. There's no other deal on the table. Nuclear war is not going to happen. I just don't see it. Hey, if I'm wrong, we'll all be dead, but if we're not, I'll owe you guys a Coke. I'll buy everyone a Coke out there if Russia uses a nuclear... That's a weird noise. If Russia uses a nuclear bomb in Ukraine, all right? That's my promise to you. That Trump being elected has really... It shook up the world, because a lot of fun things are playing out that way. You're watching the Russia-Ukraine thing, but also this Hamas war between Hamas and Israel, because you saw immediately they were talking about Hamas was calling, the day after Donald Trump was elected, Hamas was calling for an end to the war. This is partly true, partly not. Hamas has kind of been saying they want a ceasefire for a long time because it's in their best interest, but they basically said, well, we hope Donald Trump will come in there and get us a ceasefire and do all this stuff, and we don't want to fight because we're ready for this war to be done as long as Israel makes a bunch of concessions. They're not really calling for an end to the war, but you can tell that Donald Trump being elected has shaken them, because they realize that Donald Trump is a staunch supporter of Israel. You saw Qatar, or Qatar, however people want to pronounce it. Qatar basically, they kicked Hamas out of the country. They said Hamas leadership's not welcome here anymore. And it's been walked back a little bit. They said, well, we didn't exactly say that. We just said that the negotiations weren't making any progress, so we shut down their headquarters. They know what they were doing. Donald Trump gets elected, and they immediately kick him out. Why is that? Because Donald Trump is going to come in there, and he's going to say, you're protecting terrorists. You're now going to be treated like a country that protects terrorists. And they don't want any piece of that. They want American aid. They want to be friends with America. They do not want an administration in there that's going to treat them like a terrorist state because they house terrorists, which is what you should do, by the way. If you know, for example, that the leadership of Hamas is in Pakistan, or they're staying in Lebanon, or they're staying wherever, well, guess what? Then you are going to be treated like that terrorist entity. If you know that they're staying there, okay, well, you're now a terrorist state. That's what I think, because you're letting them stay there. Oh, what are you going to do? You should arrest them, because that's what they do. these Hamas terrorists that were kicked out of Qatar basically because Donald Trump got elected, they went across the street to Turkey. Can you imagine this for a second? What is going on in the world when Turkey, who is our NATO ally, supposed to be one of our close allies in NATO, they are now housing Hamas terrorists that we are funding a war against? How are we supposed to react to this? Why is Turkey in NATO? I get that there was a time when Turkey was in NATO to protect against Russian aggression, and that made sense because it's one of those states that's what NATO was founded for. But NATO's now not really just about Russia, is it? That's all it is? We're going to allow Turkey under an Islamist leader who is basically a dictator. We're going to allow this guy to just house terrorists. And it was funny. There's a diplomat from Turkey who was quoted that said, when somebody basically said, "Oh, well, how did Hamas set up their headquarters now that Qatar kicked them out?" And he said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." He said, "Hamas already spends a lot of time in Turkey. It's not a big deal that they're here now. They're not setting up a headquarters. They already spend a lot of time here." Why the hell is this allowed? Why is the U.S. not doing something about all of these states? I imagine we give money to Turkey. We seem to give money to every country in the world. Why are we giving money to Turkey when they want to house terrorists? Why would we give money to Qatar or Pakistan or Lebanon, any of these countries that house terrorism? Why do we do that? Why do we fund both sides of war? We give money to Lebanon, which then gets funneled to Hezbollah, which then attacks Israel, and then we fund Israel to fight Hezbollah. Why do we fund both sides of things? We should be giving a lot less foreign aid to 90% of the places we're giving it. It is ridiculous how much money we ship overseas to then be used against us in different ways. Turkey should be excised from NATO. They shouldn't be our ally because they are not our ally. They're not really our ally. They are a quasi-Islamist nation that is run by a dictator. We don't need that person in NATO. We don't need Erdogan. I know some people who are from Turkey. They're lovely people. They're great. All the Turkish people I know are amazing. But you cannot talk about the government of Turkey and say that they are our ally. They are our friend. They're not our friends. When you're hosting Hamas, there's a picture from April of this year. So think about that. October, let's count it up. October, November, December, January, February, March, April. This would be... this is sign language, by the way, for 6. So the 6 months after October, the October 7th massacre in Israel, you have the leader of one of our allies, Turkey, shaking hands with one of the leaders of Hamas in his office. He hosted the leader of Hamas in his office. Think about that for a moment, how crazy that is, that we're saying that guy's our ally. He's our NATO partner, so it's fine. No, it's not fine. It's not fine. Kick them out of NATO. Allies should arrest terrorists. If you want to be a ally of the United States, if you want our foreign aid, if you want our help in conflicts, if you have the power to invoke Article 5, which requires the U.S. to come defend you, if you want that power, then the U.S. has a list of people who we're looking for. If that person's in your country and you're not arresting them and then giving them to the United States or holding them so the United States can interrogate them, whatever the United States wants to do, you're not our friend. You're not our ally. That's not the way it works. You don't get to be our ally and then also harbor fugitives from our state. That's just not the way it works. And I think we should kick Turkey out of NATO. I've thought that for a long time. They're not a reliable ally, and this it cements it. When Qatar is being more ethical than Turkey, or they're at least catering to the whims of the United States better than Turkey, then that says something, because there are actual slaves in Qatar right now. I don't know if people remember this when they are going to host the World Cup, or hosted the World Cup, that a lot of the stadiums were built using actual slave labor. Think about that for a moment. The country that has actual slaves is better than our ally when it comes to dealing with terrorists in their own ranks. Silly, silly stuff. Turkey should be out of NATO. But that's all because of Donald Trump, too. That's just Donald Trump gets elected. It's going to shake up the world order, as it should, as we want, because that's what he's there for. He's there because his foreign policy was fantastic. I don't think Donald Trump has a coherent doctrine on foreign policy unless you say that peace through strength is the doctrine, because that's what he does. Peace through strength. You mess with the United States, he blows you up. That is a good foreign policy. It's a foreign policy that makes people understand where the line is. Because with Joe Biden, you don't understand the line. That's why we have this attack against Israel and the attack against Ukraine and the fall of Afghanistan and all these debacles, these foreign policy embarrassments, because they don't understand the line. Or they understand the line and understand that the line is soft. And with Donald Trump, it's not. Donald Trump, rock hard foreign policy. He's going to bomb the shit out of you. And I like that. That's what I want in my foreign policy. I'm rather hawkish on foreign policy. People have accused me of that, and I embrace the title. If you mess with America, we bomb you. That's the way it works. That's what I want, and I want a military. I want to be the world's police, because if it's not us, then who is it going to be? China? Russia? Iran? I don't want that. The United States should be the world police, because we are the better country. That's the way it is. And anyway, that's my little foreign policy riff. I'm going to stop that because we got topics to get to. We got two other things I want to talk about. It's just real quick. This one, I have almost nothing to say about it, but I got to mention it because it was big in the news. Matt Gaetz, he's out. AG, he withdrew his nomination. He said, I'm not going to be. He met with a bunch of senators, released a statement. He said, hey, I'm withdrawing. Thanks for your support. I still hope to help Donald Trump. Yay. Rah, rah, rah. This is really interesting to me because normally the way these things work, if you're in Congress, which he is in Congress, he's in the House right now, and he was nominated for a position in the cabinet. It's a Senate-confirmed position, which means that normally what people do is they wait. And after their Senate confirmation, if they get the job, they resign their position, and then they start that job, and someone else is appointed to their seat till there's a special election. That's the way it normally works. However, Gaetz did something unusual. He resigned immediately. And there was a reason for this. It's because many people have theorized that there is an ethics probe against him that was supposed to come out. Now there's this big thing about, are they going to release it because he's not technically in Congress, so it's not Congress's jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. It's a big fight. It's going to come out eventually. I have no doubt. Because there are so many leaks in Congress, it's sinking like the Titanic. It's not a big... It's not going to be a big surprise when it comes out exactly what's in the report, no matter what. But it was this interesting way of Matt Gaetz to avoid this ethics complaint. I don't know if Matt Gaetz is guilty. You don't know if Matt Gaetz is guilty. You don't even have an idea, because I don't have an idea, because I don't have any of the information and you don't have any of the information. All you have is allegations and innuendo and suspected rumblings from people about him and his drug use and his prostitution or whatever the hell the complaint is. If he's guilty, he's guilty. Okay, goodbye. If he's not guilty, he's not guilty. It doesn't matter, because most of the time, these kind of things come off to me as a smear campaign until proven otherwise. And so we'll see. But it is interesting because now we're faced with this conundrum, because I heard that this is I don't know if you'd classify this as a conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's true. I'm going to put that disclaimer right at the front. Here it is. Read it right here. I don't know if this is true. Put it right there. So I saw this interesting thing, though. Matt Gaetz has won an election to be the representative in the next Congress. I think they're on, whatever this is, the 117th Congress. Maybe it's the 118th. I can't remember. But whatever it is, this Congress. So he resigned from Congress. He said, I'm resigned effectively from the 117th Congress, effective immediately. Technically, I believe he is still the congressman-elect of the 118th Congress, which is coming up. So theoretically, he could still be sworn in January to serve his term in the next Congress. This wouldn't avoid the ethics probe, but it's an interesting thing. I'm not 100% sure how that works. So we'll see. Again, this might be totally wrong, totally off base. I saw somebody floating the theory out there, and I thought it was interesting enough to mention. I'll be interested to see where this goes. I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not going away. He'll be around doing something or other. I don't know what, but he's a big backer. And the idea is this could actually have been a way for Donald Trump to have done him a favor, because he's such a huge backer of Donald Trump. Imagine that Trump appointed him. He drops out. He gets to maintain the veneer of respectability. He avoids the ethics probe that he maybe knew was going to go poorly for him. And now he maintains his reputation and gets to go find a job somewhere else. It could just be a favor by Donald Trump. I don't know. Again, you don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. But he is out. We have to mention it. And that's all I got to say about that. Let's see here. Now, the last topic, and this is the topic that's going to make people all upset. No, everybody calm down. Don't be upset. We're just going to talk about it. It's not a big deal. All right? Don't be upset. Don't. I know how you people get out there, okay? Y'all get upset about the silliest things. But let's just talk about it, people. And what is the only topic that I got to do this dancing around for? It is obviously transgenderism. It's a great way to get canceled these days by talking about it. But it's interesting because it was dominating segments of the news, this whole thing, this fight between Nancy Mace and Sarah McBride and all the ways that it played out. And it's going around Twitter and everyone's accusing everybody of being you're a hate monger and you don't know the difference between men and women and blah, blah, blah. Stupid fight. But let's talk about it. Basically, the first ever transgender member of Congress is getting ready to be sworn in. And her name is Sarah McBride from Delaware, first transgender member of Congress. And basically, Nancy Mace, who many of you know, I think she's the Republican from, I want to say South Carolina. Nancy Mace basically pushed for a ban that would force people to use the bathroom on Capitol Hill of their biological sex, meaning that a transgender woman, a biological man, would have to use the men's bathroom. And basically the rule kind of sat there for a day, and then Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he basically pushed it through and made it a rule of the House that you have to use the bathroom of your biological sex. Okay, all right, so there's the issue. The Republicans are in charge. The Republicans make the rule. That's the rule. That's the way it works. Now, there are going to be people who want to say that I'm somehow anti-trans. I've always thought this is ridiculous. I'm not anti-trans. Do whatever you want in life. I don't care. I think there are a couple things that are wrong with the transgender movement in general. One, I think that the science on transitioning has not shown to make people happier and healthier. I don't think that you can show me anything that says that it gets better when you transition in terms of your mental health. Does that mean I don't like trans people? No. I'm just saying the data does not show that. And anyone who wants to talk about giving kids hormones or surgery is totally off their rocker. There's no place in the entire world besides the United States that still thinks that's a good idea. Most people thought it was never a good idea, but the Scandinavian countries that the left loves so much, they have all basically turned against it. Australia just signed a thing that made it illegal. There's not a country in the world that thinks this is a good idea except the United States. The places in Britain are closing their transgender youth clinics because they said, the science on this is really bad. It's actually making kids way worse. And go figure. That's what's said for the last 10 years. It's not a big shock. So when it comes to kids, I'm against it. Again, does that mean I don't like trans people? No, I don't care. I'm just saying the science is not there. And what you think you're doing is actually harming kids. That's my opinion. That's my rationale. And I think, again, the science seems to be proving that right every day. And then sports. Sports is the big one. Because sports, you have to pretend to not observe reality to say that transgender women, meaning biological men, should be allowed to compete with women. It's just wild to me that people think that's appropriate. How is it that I can show you? I could just Google it right now and pull up example after example after example of a trans woman dominating female sports. I can't do it the other way. I will not find examples of trans men beating men in sports. Why is that? Because biology is real, people. I don't know what to tell you. There are differences between men and women. And I just, if you can't acknowledge that fact, none of this is to say that you can't be transgender. None of it. None of it at all. It just means that there's a difference between men and women. That's fine. There can be a difference between men and women. It doesn't mean that you can't do what you want in life. It just, you have to live in reality. Anyway, you live how you want. I don't care. I don't. But that being said, there are going to be people who say Nancy Mace is just a big bigot. She is a hater. She's anti-trans. She doesn't want to deal with trans people because she's just a hate monger. That is not the way that this should be discussed at all. The way that this should be discussed is, do women have a right to female-only spaces? I think the answer should be yes. But is that something that makes me a hate monger? No. Nancy Mace herself is a sexual assault survivor. I don't know the extent of it. I believe, I don't even want to say this necessarily because I'm not 100% sure. I thought she said she was raped, but I might just be confusing her with a different story I heard. But imagine this. Regardless of what it was, she describes herself as a survivor of sexual assault. You're saying that Nancy Mace has to change in a room with a trans woman who is fully intact, meaning has a penis. So you're saying that Nancy Mace, even though this might make her very uncomfortable, it might give her anxiety, it might, trigger her, for lack of a better word. You're saying that Nancy Mace is the one with the problem here, and that bringing a phallus into a female-only space, if you don't like it, it's just because you're a bigot. No, there are certain people. This is like saying that, the trans women should be housed in female prisons. This is a wild thing that has already resulted in a number of sexual assaults by different individuals. It's wild to me that people can't acknowledge the basic reality, which is that it's fine that you want to live how you want to live. But I don't get to impose my view of the world on other people. I don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. No one gets to do that. I don't get to tell people that I have the right to do things that make them uncomfortable. I have some rights in this regard. I can say things that people don't want to hear because of freedom of speech. I can write things that people don't want to read because, again, the First Amendment. But there are limits on all of this. I can't, for example, I am not allowed to just strip down naked and walk through the streets. Maybe I want to, but I'm not allowed to. Why is that? Well, because we have laws against it. We have indecency laws. Because I say, well, even though I might think it's comfortable to walk around and swinging out in public, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make somebody else uncomfortable. And that level of discomfort, of a sexual nature, is actually not allowed. It's not protected in the same way that freedom of speech or freedom of expression, because it's not a legitimate form of expression. Nudity, I mean. So we have limits that we impose on people constantly for different things. There are laws against writing, for example. I'm not allowed to slander or libel people because we've decided that these are actually not legitimate forms of expression. If your gender identity is wrapped up in you needing to use the woman's changing room, then how is this different than anything I just listed? Oh, because you're saying, well, I'm not imposing my will on anybody else. But you are. Because let's say for all of human history, women's spaces have meant you have a vagina. And then you're saying, well, now it doesn't because it's 2024 and now a woman can also have a penis. Well, you're the one who's changing reality. You're the one who's changing what the historical definition of the word woman meant. And you have to explain to me how then if you make someone uncomfortable, that's a them problem, because I don't see it as a them problem. If I was in a locker room and a woman came in and stripped down, it wouldn't make me uncomfortable. I think it was weird, but it wouldn't make me uncomfortable in the same way. Why is that? Because women are not going to, there's no implicit threat of force from women to men, not in general. Whereas the implicit threat of force from a man to woman is there. If historically, like if you're a woman and you get on an elevator at night in a parking garage and a man steps on, there is this uncomfortability in that interaction because there's a threat of violence that goes one way. Men can harm women. Women can't harm men. A man in a woman's locker room is a threat to women, even if that person's a good person. This is not to say that transgender people are a threat, so don't confuse what I'm trying to say. But I'm saying, from a woman's point of view, if you're looking at a man, men are bigger on average. Men are stronger on average. Men commit more violent crime by far than their female counterparts. If I'm a man and I'm alone in the locker room and a woman comes in, I'm not afraid. I'm confused. If I'm a woman and I'm alone in the locker room and a man comes in, I'm afraid. That's the difference. And so you say, are women entitled to female-only spaces? Are they entitled to feel safe? The answer should be yes. And the answer shouldn't be, well, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings if not. Well, I'm not the one who wants to change all the rules to accommodate myself. The rules have existed in perpetuity throughout history. And for as long as we have been a country, women's changing areas have meant for women. I don't care if you want to be a transgender woman and you want to use the she, her pronouns, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But you don't then get to make women uncomfortable by parading around in front of them or being in a female-only space where they are the ones who have to deal with how uncomfortable it is. I'm sorry. It's just, that to me seems unfair. And I don't understand. I've never had someone explain it to me in a way that makes it seem like a woman like Nancy Mace with a legitimate concern, a sexual assault survivor, should have to be the one to make changes to her life. Oh, Nancy Mace is the one uncomfortable? Why can't she go change somewhere else? So if she's the one with the problem because a biological man wants to be in the woman's locker room. I never will get that argument. I don't understand it. There are more important things to talk about than this, too. It amazes me how bad the corporate media is, that this has been all over Twitter. It's been all over the news talking about this and painting Nancy Mace this way and talking about it nonstop as though it's the biggest story in the country. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It does to a small extent. Tiny, look at this. Tiny amount it matters. But not really. Not the way that we're acting. Not the amount of coverage it's generated. It doesn't deserve that. Anyway, we're gonna leave it there for the week. How long are we going here? Oh, yeah, 40 minutes. We're going to leave it there for the week, people. As always, questions, comments, concerns. I love to answer everything you guys throw at me. And I hope, again, remember, top of the show, prayers for Dennis Prager if you're the praying type. If not, just kind thoughts and words would be appreciated because he is not doing great, it sounds like, and we hope he has a speedy recovery. Everything else, just send my way. If you questions, concerns, comments, all that good stuff. And, guys, I will catch you next Friday.